Professor Roubini, we live on debt, to quote you exactly, and I don't know if there is a solution to get out. Is it?
Well, in order to resolve problems of debt, there are two options. Option number one is to spend less, save more, to reduce your debts over time. An individual can do it, a family can do it, a government can do it, a country can do it. That's one solution. The second solution is your debt becomes less sustainable when your income is low, because the ratio between how much debt you owe and your income that implies how sustainable it is. If you can grow your income stronger, then any level of debt becomes more sustainable over time. So the issue is how you can achieve a greater economic growth to resolve issues of debt, not through fiscal austerity only, but also through economic success.
We have an example in Romania because we have a lot of elections this year. We can see that the government promises a lot of increase for wages, while our debt is over 52% of our GDP. What is this doing to an economy?
Some government intervention in the economy, of course, is valid. You have to provide a wide range of public services, healthcare, education, pensions, public services that also sustain economic activity. But then when government spending becomes excessive and you're also raising a lot of taxes in a distortionary way, that can have a negative impact on economic growth. So you can end up in a vicious cycle that you have a high debt ratio, debt to income, that reduces economic growth because you have high interest rates that crowds out private sector economic activity. But then if economic growth is low, your debt becomes even more unsustainable because in order to pay your debt, you need to have income. So you can end up into a vicious cycle of high debt, lower growth making the debt more unsustainable. So you have to break this vicious cycle and go in a cycle where there is less deficits, less debt, stronger economic growth, and more economic growth makes also debts more sustainable.
So what would be your advice when the debt of a country is quite high, like Romania has it now?
It is high, but actually by European standards is not yet at the critical level, but you want to be prudent before it becomes too dangerous. I would say that countries have to decide, first of all, how much government spending has to be as a share of GDP, which type of activity should be done by the government as opposed to the private sector. I think in many countries government spending is excessive. So if you can reduce government spending as a share of GDP, invest more into capital spending, public investment, infrastructure, provision of the basic public services like education, healthcare and others, rather than just redistributing income. Some countries have some fiscal space for raising more of the revenues without distorting economic growth. Other countries, the revenue as a share of GDP tax is already too high. So in that situation, it's better to cut spending rather than increasing revenue as we're reducing the deficit and make it more sustainable over time.
Well, economies like ours are, of course, dependable as well of superpower economies like US and China. How would you describe those two economies? Are they increasing, decreasing? Are they in a period of transition? How do you see them?
I would say that the US, from a cyclical point of view, is doing quite well. People who were worried about the recession in the US, instead growth has been above potential. I would say that actually one of the strong drivers of global growth this year is going to be the US. China is going into a more bumpy direction because growth used to be 10% for many decades. Before COVID was 7, after COVID it was in 5, and many believe that the state capitalist policies of President Xi Jinping are going to reduce the potential growth of China to 3%. So I would say that in the last few years the rhetoric was go with China because China is going to be the fastest growing economy. US is actually weakening. I think now there'll be a reversal. US is much more ahead of even China in some of the technologies and industries of the future, is growing very robustly. The application of AI may increase potential growth from 2 to 3% or even higher, while China, because of its own wrong policies, seeing a bit of a soft patch, economic growth slowly is reducing. And there are also geopolitical aspects of it, because there is a rivalry between US and China. So if you are a friend and ally of the US, you should also use Western technologies rather than depending more risky technologies coming from China. But there's definitely this rivalry between the two major economies in the world.
You predicted the crisis we all felt in 2008. I have to ask you, are we in a better position now, or shall we expect the next crisis in the near future? Or, you are the specialist.
Well, I don't expect a global crisis in the near future. Of course, there are individual countries that are in big trouble, being defaulting on their debts and things of that sort. But what I say in my new book, Mega Threats, is that there's a slow motion train wreck. Crisis occurs when everything goes crashing at the same time, like 2007, 2008. Instead, there is the build-up of all these economic, monetary, and financial risks, both social, political, geopolitical, environmental, health, technological, demographic, and each one of them weakens economic growth, causes more cost of production and inflation, so causes stagflation, and eventually becomes something that can lead also to an economic crisis, but it's more of a slow motion train wreck rather than what happened in 2007-8, where you had a very jump crash of the economy. So it's a slow motion problem. And being a slow motion, people don't tend to react to it very easily, because when there's a crash, you have to do something. You have to resolve the crisis. When it's slow motion, then it's like, a frog that's being boiled alive in warmer and warmer, hotter water, but it's occurring slowly, boiling the frog. So same thing for the world economy.